Things have changed. It's not going to be the best.
No one's going to see him. Sensational, mate. Sensational. The typical business dramas, no staff, making too much money. None of my people get to work out. You love it or what? Standard or what? Unnecessary, yeah. Particularly most professional. Now what you've done is create all these procedures. When has government introduced that many procedures of quality weather? When? Never. Now, we've got the problems. Use the points, there, those there, do it down. Where's the extra, brain thinking that you can do?
Quer jogar campeão?
like the blind leading the blind. They're supposed to know what they're doing. I've come to the Lordy time. I wonder what he's other done. Must have upset him early, huh? Yeah, good job.
We're playing next. So
what do you guys do? No, but you got a bit more personality.
yeah, that's so nice.
And head.
Really? Is that what does it? We only changed this photos recently. Yeah, I think just the way things are now.
Where are you based now? Oh, West, huh? You don't work with what's that?
No, I don't actually. It's because I use like Lebanese accountants as well.
You don't know. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, you can't resist the view. Especially that well executed work.
Oh, wait.
Hold on.
Yeah. No, it's not up here, so it's we'll let it dry out again.
Wait, so you're
No, perfect, whatever.
I'm from Charleston. Oh, so
No, that's what you guys that's correct. Never these Arabs. Funny enough, I actually had I wanted to go to Lebanon. I couldn't go. Because I'm home by myself. Well, I just thought, it's the only place to go by yourself. It's the point of understand, like, you can go with your family at the moment. Amanda, you know, Melbourne's not bad. Everyone's saying, hey, motherfucker, I like it if somebody from I grew up in Auburn, I went to school in Auburn. Let me sleep in the stupid. Where did you grow up? It's the base level. There's a lot. Imagine what that is.
What they say is
You guys already have it. You guys got together or what? No, he trained you, he trained you. Whereabouts in Norwest are you guys? Yeah. I used to work at listen to the drive. Frankos? I used to be in that building. Never had that. Really?
She is actually, yeah. plan was like obviously to go and I was
Say Neil, yeah.
Sounds like a flop.
Me?
I don't like
Yeah. But I always say, just work it out and we know what it is. I'm very happy with that. I tried to make sure it's got long story, I'm like, listen, you're going to get what you want. I'll just make it lame, because say we stop coming to them, and if you build people, you're not going to get nothing from people. So, be smart though. Yeah, no, I just want blood.
I said this year, one of my goals is to get more touch on the Arab side. So give me something like that.
Why? You saw the lottery? You cheated on
I lost.
You're a $12 million guy, and then you're working.
People always used to say, as you get older, you sort of go back to your roots. I was like, yeah. It's so
I said to my I'm back. My cousin who got recently married, I said to my mum, do you want to get married? What if you said marriage? He goes, yeah. I go, we know what that means. He's going to holiday. I said, yeah. I was Arab. By yourself?
Work it out.
Are they giving you clientele? Not being everything. What's that?
No way.
I actually want to open an office there. There's no engineering competition there. Yeah. And guess what? All good subjects. All the groups come your kids home office, working.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, members and guests, it's time to start this evening's address and welcome to the Australian Arab Business Council's reading May of 2023. So glad you made it here so far. And May, of course, is budget month. And of course, that was delivered just yesterday, less than 24 hours ago. And we have our president, Radwan Hamdan, from Hamdan & Associates, who's kind of listened, felt, get a good grip of what's happening within the budget and convert it into a PowerPoint presentation for your convenience tonight and hopefully delivering it within under 20 minutes and of course having moments for your questions as well. And I should actually note that we're standing on Gadigal land and carry space their abilities past, present and emerging. So I see many new faces in the room, which always gets a bit more exciting for us over the Arab Business Council because it's more friends, more opportunities to network, and so we're glad to have you here with us, just as much as I hope you're glad to be a part of this in this evening. So the Arab Business Council, we are a vibrant organisation that conducts monthly networking meetings, and we share ideas, collaborate. The purpose is to educate, it's to network, it's to grow, and of course to have a little bit of fun in the process as well. And so hopefully tonight we're able to encompass that all with you this evening. As you can see, we have a lot of banners through the room, and these people are our sponsors, and without our sponsors we wouldn't be able to bring you such a presentation here today over at the Villa Blanca reception. If we can have like a big round of applause, a bit of gratitude to the service of the Villa Blanca. Very rarely there's such a delicious array of mezza. Don't fill yourself up too much here tonight because we do have maize coming on shortly. The tabbouleh does look tempting from this side over here. So a special thank you to them. And I do say that Badum Maza, that tabbouleh does look good. So I'd like to pay gratitude to our foundation sponsors, our foundation partners here this evening, and that is the Arab Bank Australia, affectionately known as AABC, and to the table over there. To our premium members, Sam the Pettyman and Temple Tires, where those guys over here, I think I saw Sam here, Bingo, where's Mr. Tyler? Where are we? There we are. Big round of applause for them. To our silver members, as always, it is a mighty long list, but we do appreciate every single one of you. You just see their banners across the room, and they are All Star Solutions, Naturally Timber, Ace Polystyrene Products, Hamdan & Associates, Advanced Timber, Flora Enterprise, Datcom, Iron Brick Promo Print, and of course the mighty Canterbury Bankstown Council. Big round of applause for their special support too as well. And of course to our new members and our guests, we will address you a little bit further in the evening, and to our media partners as well. Thank you very much for shooting this evening live on Facebook for all our friends and family to see, and of course for them to get a bit of a snippet as to what's happening in Australia with the federal budget that's just been delivered. So tonight we're expecting a budget breakdown, and hopefully it's just a breakdown. Hopefully it's not an absolute smackdown from what we've heard in the media so far. I mean, I certainly hope the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, because this middle class living isn't my vibe. So hopefully we'll see something good coming out here tonight. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Radwan Hamdan to the stage. And just before we do, in case you haven't met him yet, if I can have your attention on this slide over here in particular, Rodney is actually our president of the Australian Arab Business Council. He's a chartered accountant and a certified practicing accountant who's the principal of Hamdan & Associates. He holds a Bachelor of Economics degree from the Sydney University, majoring in Commerce Law. He worked with Arthur Andersen, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and spent quite a number of years on overseas assignments in Asia and the Middle East, specialising in international taxation, including Australia and Dubai, where he started his tax practice. He's a regular economic commentator He's produced content for SBS Radio and, of course, contributed to many financial magazines, in business magazines. So we'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. President himself, Radwan Hamdan.
Thank you, George. For a minute you said Mr. Putin, actually I was Victorian. May I have your attention? Actually, I need your undivided attention for the next 20-25 minutes. It took a lot of effort actually to summarize the budget for you. This is an exercise that I'm used to doing. This is my 17th budget. Jim Chalmers, the treasurer, actually can talk about his budget. This is his second budget, if you remember. I did his budget presentation in October 22. It was a mini budget, and the main budget, this is the thing, the main budget. So I would like you to pay attention. There's a lot of information in this budget. Some of it is technical. I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. Thank you for coming, members and visitors and friends. It's really always exciting to see so many faces that I know and so many faces that I would like to know. And I urge everybody who hasn't joined this council to join. You will see the benefit. This is one of two of other many presentations that we do effectively on a monthly basis, and you will see the benefit. We do have a problem with the clicker actually. Normally we don't use the video actually at the back, too much light, so I think we will have a problem in showing the slides effectively. Can you go back one slide if you don't mind? Because this is not meant to be for conferences, but we're using it. So in terms of I just wanted to show the first slide, which gives you a good impression. Next slide, please, George. This is the way they look the budget. I'm not sure if you can read the side slides or the back slide. You will see there basically Jim Chalmers cooking and something for everyone. And you can see there on the little pots, it's the sole parents and the unemployed and the NDIS and the rest of it. So really this budget, I think that gives you a glimpse of what's happening and how they're doing this budget. It's a battler budget, and as we progress in the speech, it'll be more obvious. Next slide, George. The big elephant in the room in the mini budget back in October and now is inflation. So inflation is the backbone of this budget, and the whole idea of this budget is to provide inflation relief support to the battlers. Now, you will, as we progress in the discussion, you will see if it really does or it doesn't. Next slide, George. Next slide. The reason for the high inflation, I would like just to again explain it. I think in the last October meeting we discussed it, and now we're living with it. If you recall back, after COVID, back in May 22, we had the bad news that inflation was exceeding 8%. And it took a while actually for the inflation rate to hit below 7%, which is what we have today. And the reason for it actually is COVID-19 issues, depreciating Aussie dollar. As you know, we were back in 20 and 80 cents in the dollar, now we're in 60 something. The Ukraine war with the energy prices, the floods that we had, we forgot about them, but back in 21 and 22 we had lots of these floods and natural disasters that really impacted the price of goods, particularly veggies and meats and what have you. The high demand post the COVID, the China zero policy back then, now they opened up in the last few months, and supply chain issues with the price of oil. So all of that globally created the atmosphere for high inflation. And we had countries that were reporting 10% and 11%. We were lucky that it was under the 8%. Next slide. Just in a nutshell, what you see there is, I'm not sure if people are looking to the left or to the right, but basically this is a history of the deficits and only one surplus for the last 9 or 10 years. You will see there that since 2013-14, we had a continuous deficits, from 48, 41, 29, 4 billion, 105, and at the end, only this is the first year in 15 years where we have a budget surplus, which is the $4.2 billion, a very slender surplus that for the first time in 15 years we reported that. And I think the coalition was giving hard time that Labour will never be able to deliver a surplus, and they did. And I'll explain that there is some politics behind that surplus and how it came about. The funny part is that although 23 with the difficulties and the inflation, we're reporting 4.2 billion in surplus. Moving forward, we're looking at 15 billion deficit in 24, going to 32 billion, and so forth for the next 3 or 4 years. So really, although it looks like a good story, the real story will come later. It's not as good as you think here. Next slide, George. This is a summary of the projected deficit over time. It shows how really the government and economists can get things wrong. This is the same number for 2023 that different treasurers predicted. So we're looking at the deficit that was expected and the $4.2 billion that I mentioned earlier. So in April 19, Josh Frydenberg was actually expecting a surplus of $9.2 billion, if you remember his famous saying, back in the black. And then in October 20, we were hit between April 19 and October 20 with COVID-19, and we ended up with a projected deficit for 23 of 67 billion. Then in May 21, we ended up with another projection for 99 billion. In March 22, again, the coalition revised down their deficit to 76, 78 billion. October 22, this is the Jim Chalmers deficit, which was actually 37 billion. And the last as actual we're expected in the next 4 weeks will be $4 billion. Just to give you an idea how unreliable is the projection done by the government or done by economists. Next slide. This is the same slide. It just shows how consistently year on year we've been in deficit, big deficit. That's why we have all this debt accumulating for the last 10, 15 years. And the only good news is the $4.2 billion that we expect by the end of June. And as I said, we then dip again into deficit. Deficit meaning our income is less than our expense, means we're spending more than what we collect in terms of receipts. So in 24, we're expecting 15 billion deficit, ballooning to 32 to 38 and so forth. So all these projections are pessimistic and they rely on some assumptions. Next slide. The big assumption that is benefiting the government is the iron ore. The iron ore, and if you look at the slide on the right-hand side, my side, you will see there the big improvement. I'm talking about 22, 23. That kick in iron ore prices. Iron ore has been, typically a few years ago, $50 a ton. Then it ballooned actually to $200 a ton, then went down and down. A year ago would have been $75 a ton. As we speak, it's $105 a ton. So the budget for 23 by the coalition inherited by the Labour was expecting the price of iron ore to be factored at $55 a ton. So that's why the government is banking a big benefit, which is $82 billion from the sale of iron ore at the higher price, because they're selling. Imagine a new business, if you're selling something at double the price, then you're going to really be making a lot of money. And that's what happened. There's two reasons for the surplus. The first one is the iron ore price being double what it was expected, and the second one are the tax collections. The tax collections, again, we got another $75 billion that was collected in 22, 23 because of full employment. As you know, our employment rate is now 3.5%. Next slide. In terms of, as you know, our GDP is about $2 trillion. The GDP is the government income plus all the value of goods and services produced in the economy, which is really worth $2 trillion. The money that actually is spent from that is $684 against the backdrop of about $620 in income and receipts that the government collects. What I wanted to highlight is that last line in my slide. The social security, spent by the government is over $250 billion. So half is spent by the government is in social services. And that is something big. That is probably exceeds many other countries in the world. Next, I wanted to give this, really that's more of a political slide than an economic slide. It shows, this slide shows actually the red is the spend, the blue is the income, and this is the treasurer over time, different treasurers. You will see actually, that's why the coalition always claiming that Labour are not good managers, because since the 90s, they've always, you can see the spend is the red and the blue is the income. They spend more than what they earn. They had a surplus in Keating days during that recession and raising interest rates. And then again, we had a ride where Labour in the 90s basically accumulated deficits. Then we had John Howard coming into the game, and you can see there the blue line exceeding the red line, which means we had surpluses consistently. Next slide. You can see it. This is where the coalition was in power, where we had surpluses. Then we had the Wayne Swan, and then 2009-2010, where again we had cumulative deficits for a good 10 years before we had Josh Frydenberg. And Josh Frydenberg, in fairness to the guy, actually was predicting a surplus just in May 22 before he lost his position. And this is that point in time where we would have had a small surplus, but then we had a change of basically government, and you can see there we spent more, but somehow we ended up with that surplus that we're talking about. So this is this point in time where we have the surplus of $4.2 billion. And then moving forward, we expect that we can end up with deficits again. Next slide. This summarizes basically the economics of the country, actually. So GDP is expected to be at 3.7, or was 3.7% in 22, is going to drop to 3.25, which is really an odd number, because if you look at the minutes of the Reserve Bank, they consistently say that the rate of growth by the end of 23 will be 1.5% if we're lucky. So that number by the Treasurer is a little bit overstated. And then this is the Treasury numbers. The growth is expected to drop down to 1.5, then go up to 2.25, and so forth. Inflation, as I said, we had 8%. Back late last year, particularly in November, December. Then we're looking at dropping it to 6%, and hence that increase in interest rates that we've witnessed in the last 11 months, 11 times. And basically, they expected to go down inflation in 24 to 3.25 and continuously go down like that. So wages growth, this is how much wages are growing. You will see that wages are growing to less than the inflation, which means the affordability of households is going backwards, which means the wages are not growing to the same extent that you're spending. But if you add to it also the mortgage stress that people have, that's a really bad scenario. Unemployment rate, we, as I said, we're actually at full employment. 3 years ago, we would have been at 5%. Last year at 3.8. We're dropping to 3.5, and then surprisingly, actually, the Treasury is expecting that the unemployment rate will actually go up from 3.5 to 4.25 to 4.5 and so forth, which is really, again, a bit pessimistic. Next slide. This is the faint line is the inflation, and the red line is the inflation, and the faint line is the wages. You can see where wages basically is always trailing inflation. Inflation is always above, look at that. This is the area we're in now. Inflation is way above wages, and we're expecting that in 12 months or 24 months, we're going to start having wages exceeding inflation because inflation will go down. Again, is that wishful thinking? Time will only tell us. Next. This is the progression of inflation. If you remember, for the last 10 years, even just up, including the pandemic, we were always having very mild inflation. It was always less than 2%. In fact, the Reserve Bank wanted to get it hardly, in some cases, actually, like in 2019, we had deflation. So things were going backwards, going cheaper. And look at the previous years, 2.25, 2%, 1.9. And I remember the Reserve Bank wanted actually to basically increase the inflation rate to that 1 to 2 range that they always like, the 2.5% range. And then they've got more than what they wished for. Moving forward, we ended up with 4%. As you recall, back in December, we had 8%. Now we're looking at 6%. And really, we're expecting within 12 months, we're going to be at 3.25%. Again, is that going to happen? A bit of wishful thinking. Moving forward, unemployment rate, as I mentioned earlier, look at how it used to be. 17, 5.6%. 2020, 6.5%, and it just kept getting better actually. And in 23 we had almost what you call full employment, where really only have 3.5% of the population unemployed. And as I said, it's going to go up in the next 2 years. Maybe skip this one actually. Next. This one, I'm not sure if you can read it actually at your end. It's very blurry. So this is gross debt, and again, I need you to correlate these numbers with the deficits that we have. That shows actually our debt level in 2009. This is in billions of dollars, and how we've accumulated debt. Before we had a ceiling. It couldn't be more than $200 billion. They scrapped that ceiling, as you can see, back a few years ago, when they realized that debt is inevitable because of these cumulative deficits that you had to borrow to sustain spending. So we end up actually in this year almost above $1 trillion by in the next 2 years. So for 2023. Again, you're looking at 923 billion, which is again a horrendous number, which is really a high percentage of the GDP. Again, it is usual for countries to have that level of debt, but we're not used to it. We're a lucky country. We've always had income. As I said, only in the last 15 years that we started accumulating that level of debt. As you know, our GDP is more than $2 trillion, and now our debt is going to be almost $1 trillion, basically. So it's almost hitting the 50% mark in a few years' time. Next. This is the, again, international GDP growth. I just wanted to compare Australia to other countries. You will see Australia actually is, very much comparable to other countries. China is 4.5%. Australia is 1.25%. And contrary to what you saw on the other slide, I think that's the realistic number from the RBA. You can see Japan 1.8%, the US 1%. So we're, globally the world growth rate is going to be 1.4% next year. So we're very much on par with other countries. So we're really paying the price of this global downturn, and but we don't have that prospect of recession. In fact, the only one that had a prospect of recession was the USA. But the USA, in fact, back in September and December, they did have, you define a recession by 2 negative quarters with negative growth. And what happened is, in America, it is not that formula. There's another committee that sit down and determine if they decide that even with 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth that you have a recession. So they needed no recession. And as I said, they're expecting 1% growth in Australia. We're on the edge of it, but I don't think it will happen. I think not after that surplus and not after what I see. in the future slide. GDP per capita, I just wanted to show, this is if you divide the amount of output that we produce by the number of people, you will see that we're in the top 10 nations in the world. You know, our average income is close to $60,000. So we sit there with most of the European countries, we exceed the USA, so we're really in good hands in terms of, we feel we're the lucky country, and we are, and you feel it actually. We're a rich nation, although we suffered post-COVID, but I think things will come back. Next. Personal income tax. Again, I mentioned the surplus, and I mentioned the iron ore price, and I mentioned how we've made $82 billion because of that exceptional price that the Chinese pay for the iron ore. Equally, you will see, the expected tax collections we were expecting 263, and now we ended up with 297. Look at every year, actually, we exceeding the tax collections that are forecast, and this is straight going to the bottom line. And this is why you have that, basically the surplus in this year, and I think you'll have it in future years, although it looks pessimistic. Next. This is very important, where we're saying, look at the amount of additional revenue without the iron ore increase and the tax revenue increase, that we're going to collect $9 billion from tax avoidance, tobacco excise $3 billion, petroleum resource rent 2.4 billion, super tax concessions. I'll explain these in future slides. So basically, this is the additional income that we expect to generate. Next. And this is the additional expense that we will make, which is pay rise for the aged care workers, boosting Medicare, job seeker boost, vendor assistance, single parent support, energy bill relief, and I'll discuss these in a minute. So you can tell actually from that slide, for every dollar of revenue, additional revenue, we're spending $2 from these spending initiatives. So that's why moving forward is expecting deficits, not surpluses. Next. Interest rates, as you know, for the last 12 or 13 months, we've had consistent rates, sometimes quarter, sometimes 0.5%. We sit at 3.85%. As you know, last month was a surprise rate increase that took all economists and most banks, all the 4 banks, I think, were not expecting a pay rise, an interest increase. Now the bet is, will there be another one in June, given that this budget is high on spending? I think if you listen to the IBA, between the lines, the expectation was we've hit the maximum. Now it's going to be on hold, although they didn't say it in so many words. But I think that would have been the expectation of most economists. With this budget, it's a 50-50 chance that they may or may not. But if you follow currencies, and you will see basically that the Aussie dollar actually has weakened, which means that the market is reading that budget as not being inflationary, and that there will not be an interest rate increase. The bankers may agree or disagree with me here, but really the Aussie dollar is sitting as we speak at 67.5 cents to the dollar. I think if it was a good budget, an inflationary budget, with a serious expectation of a rate increase in interest, then you would have seen a big jump in the Aussie dollar. So this is the, maybe skip that actually, I'll talk about it in other slides, even this one skip. So the theme of the budget is cost living support. Basically, cost of living support to help the battlers. As I said, what they will do is they're going to give 5 million low and middle income householders $500 basically over 5 years to help them with the energy bill. So most people on Centrelink, family tax benefits, the rest of it, will actually get that $500. So that's one of the giveaways that they've done, which is really more of a stimulus in a typical sense. Then they will also triple the Medicare by an additional $3.5 billion to lift the bulk billing incentive to GPs. For the doctors amongst us here, that's good news for you guys, which means you will have more income to see more patients face-to-face or remotely. The problem is, do we have enough doctors? The system is already overworked, but maybe not underpaid with this money. So that's something that they've given again to help the middle class and low income to see doctors, and they tripled the Medicare subsidies for the doctors to achieve this. Next. There'll be an additional $2 billion to basically let the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation to deliver at least 1,200 social and affordable houses within 5 years. Now, for the builders against us, I'm not sure whether 1,200 social and affordable houses will fix the housing problem, but that's what they come up with. And again, that 1,200 is over a 5-year period. They will do a boost to rent assistance, so anybody on Centrelink who receives rent assistance allowance will get a higher increase, will get more rent assistance, which will increase basically to $240 a fortnight. That will cost us again $2.7 billion. They will increase the job seeker benefit, which is the unemployment benefit, by $40 a fortnight. That will also cost us $5 billion, and they will also increase the job seeker rate to be more like the pension rate, which is a lot higher for the over 55s. Single parent will also receive higher parenting payment until the child reaches 14 years of age, not 8 years of age. They will actually subsidize the wages of aged care workers, which is 15% uplift, which will be paid by the government, and they will, because there's a requirement that all aged care homes have to have nurses and 24 hours a day. And the government, because of many of them are closing, they decided actually to put that subsidy and pay for it, at least for the first 12 months. They will ramp up the spending on defense, missiles and submarines, for obvious reasons, as you know who's the enemy they're looking at. And then there's 1.3 billion household upgrades to help 111,000 homes become eco-friendly. So they're going to actually help 111,000 homes to put solar panels and double glazing. Guys, can I have some quiet, please? It took a lot of effort. Guys, please, I would like complete silence. It took a lot of effort for me to prepare this, so I would like you to listen. Next. Also, one of the highlights is that they will be canning, meaning stopping some infrastructure projects that they inherited from the previous government. They will also increase the petroleum resource rent to generate additional income. They will raise additional taxes, $2.4 billion over 4 years by increasing their tax compliance and tax audits. They will extend the GST compliance program, which is audit, to generate $3.8 billion. So I'll tell you that the tax office will become very, very impressive. They'll increase the tobacco excise by 5% per year for the next 3 years, and they will put measures in place to control NDIS. NDIS spending really has gone through the roof. As we speak, it's actually exceeding $40 billion a year, and the expectation that it's going higher by 10 to 15% every year, and it may well reach $100 billion a day if we don't control it. So next, so you will see in this slide actually, these are the rising costs which are actually impacting the budget bottom line. NDIS being 12% or 13% of the tax collections of the revenue, interest rate again 8.5%. Hospitals, aged care, defense. We've always heard about defense and the investments that the government is taking, and clearly all these, to me, unnecessary costs, at least some of them need to be controlled. They managed to say that they will control the NDIS to drop from 14%, which is not really 14, but to become under 10%. But even if it's under 10%, you're still looking at $30 to $35 billion a year for NDIS. As you know, Bill Shorten is handling this. They put this statement, but there was no action plan released on how they're going to control the NDIS. Next. As you must have heard in the news, they're going to introduce any super fund where the members have a balance of $3 million, they will actually tax it at 30%, although historically from day one it has always been 15%. We're looking at mostly here is self-managed super funds. So any high balance fund at $3 million or above will pay double the normal tax rate, which is 30 rather than 15. They will actually increase the frequency of superannuation payments. Most of us have business in this room. We pay superannuation quarterly. So at the end of every quarter, a month later, we actually pay. So the March superannuation or the March wages for that quarter, January, February, March, you actually pay the super by the end of April. Moving forward, starting from 26 or 27, actually you have to pay to the pay. So if you pay your employees weekly, you remit superannuation weekly. If you pay your employees fortnightly, you pay superannuation. They call it payday superannuation. So the minute you pay, which is a good idea, but it may well put some business under a lot of pressure. This is the big ticket item actually. Immigration. Immigration is gonna be the key word here. We will have 400,000 migrants, skilled migrants mostly, in 2023, up from what they projected in October 22, which is 235,000 people. So we have 400,000 in 23, and they will improve visa processing so that people can get their visas faster. They will also put a mechanism for mutual recognition of qualifications between India and Australia, so that you have more migrants from India coming to Australia, which is really going to create some competition, be it fair or unfair. I think it's unfair competition to bring people here who haven't done the hard work, give them the qualification, and let them compete with the homegrown workforce. 2024 immigration to accumulate 315,000 more migrants, and in the next 5 years we're aiming for 1.5 million migrants. This is the highest migration intake in the history of the country. So there's another slide which I will show you shortly, which will show how this country will grow exponentially in headcount. Iron ore, as I mentioned earlier, is projected to be at $60 per ton, and this is where they save their money today. It's 105. So they will make some money, if some savings or some additional income, if actually the price goes higher or stays at that level. Because in the budget they're putting it at $60 a ton. As you know, the Aussie dollar also depreciated by 20 to 25% in the last 18 months. So that would naturally give additional income, because you're getting that income in US dollars translated to Aussie dollar. You're going to get 20-25% uplift just because of the depreciation. So that's also additional income that the government is taking credit for, but it's really by definition the level of government income. Next. This slide shows the population explosion. Today we're at 26 million, and we're going to really be closer to the 29 million, in very short period of time, 26, 27. So you can imagine the pressure on every one of us here, on the infrastructure, on housing in particular. I'm not sure, but they talk of, that explosion in population with 1.5 million migrants, and you don't have the infrastructure to accommodate them, and you're expecting actually a lift in the unemployment rate. If you remember my earlier slide, we're actually going from 3.5% to 4.5%. How do you correlate an increase, in migration with an increase in unemployment? Really, that means that these migrants potentially are substituting us in a way. So again, I'm not sure what is the plan for the government, but this is a bit premature and maybe planned in a hurry, in my opinion. Next. There will be investment in renewable energy. Because as you know, Australia has a target by 2050 to have zero emission. So they will give $2 billion for investment in hydrogen as a clean alternative. And I think Fortescue Metals are the leaders on this. So Fortescue Metals will be probably the biggest beneficiary of this hydrogen clean energy that they're talking about. There's no mention of investment in major infrastructure as part of the plan because they want to control spending, but they're giving that other money away. They will increase the departure tax from $60 a passenger to $70 a passenger. Next. Tax changes to boost build for rent house. There is a system currently called Home Guarantee Scheme where if you got 2% deposit, you can borrow if you haven't done it in the past. They're going to change the system to, the government will allow 5% and they will guarantee the balance of the loan, and it doesn't have to be an individual who has not bought property before. As long as in the last 10 years you haven't bought property, you can use that Home Guarantee Scheme. If two people can be friends, can be cousins, they can still use that scheme, whereas before it used to be only husband and wife. Again, I think that something like this will help the housing problem. Skilled migration, again, they increased the minimum threshold to pay a migrant under the skilled migration from $53,900, it's going to increase to $70,000. So, and they're going to make the migration less red tape. So these migrants have, go through the express lane, they get $70,000, and they settle in as quicker than you think. International graduates who finish here and normally have to go back will get 2 more years of work rights. So they will automatically get 2 more years to stay here and work. That's something that it wasn't there before. They will add another 300,000 free TAFE and vocational education for critical industries. So aged care, child care, they were really investing in these, and they're offering 300,000 free TAFE positions for people to use. The business. Really, I feel sorry for the business in this budget. All they've done is introduce this instant asset write-off. So a single asset worth $20,000 if you buy, basically a courtroom or a car for the business worth 20K, and it has to be 20K or less. If it's more, you don't get the write-off. So, and it's by individual asset value, and it's a one-off. So you get 20K write-off if your business turnover is $10 million or less. As we speak, it's $150,000 per item, and you can do money items. During COVID, they did this instant asset write-off. So that's actually a backward move big time from 150K to 20K for the instant asset write-off. Multinationals, again, not that I should have any sympathy, effectively they're clamping on transfer pricing, which means they do deals with each other, subsidiaries and holding companies, and basically minimize the tax, because one company is in a high tax jurisdiction and another one is in a low, let's say Dubai. You can invoice Dubai, and basically the profits end up in Dubai where you don't pay tax, and the company here, basically saves a lot of tax. From a holding company perspective, they're winning. What they're going to do is multinationals will pay a minimum tax of 15%, and their expenses will be capped at 90%. That is something unique, actually, where regardless of it's genuinely making or not making profit, effectively it's a deeming provision. I'm yet to see the details, but they say multinationals will pay 15% tax. Businesses with turnover of up to $50 million will get a one-off payment of $650 against their power bills, and get a 20% deduction of any investment in heating or cooling or solar systems. So if you're eco-friendly, you get 20% of that, not the full amount, and you get $650, which is really ridiculous. I think if your turnover is around the 50 million mark. They do more funding to allow public service to reach the highest headcount in history of the public service. They'll increase the public service by 15%. They will also encourage defense force personnel who complete their contract. They'll pay them $50,000 to stay on and continue to service in the ADF. Again, as if we're in a war crisis, but that's what they're doing. Next. As I mentioned, payday superannuation, You can skip that, I think, John. Yeah. My thoughts on the budget really is very little for the business in this budget. There's no real plan to tackle inflation. If anything, if it's not inflationary, definitely it's not deflationary in this budget. There's no real plan to tackle the lack of wage growth, productivity compared to inflation. Next. This budget, in my opinion, is clearly a labor-based budget. It's a populist budget. It's really targeted towards the labor voting base. It's characterized by higher spending, something we are avoiding in a time of high inflation. Will there be an appetite? Because as I mentioned earlier, the idea was that, the feeling was that we hit the peak and probably we're going to be on hold. Yes, May was a bit of a surprise. Now it's on the cards again whether we'll see another quarter rate cut increase. I doubt it again, as I said, judging from the Aussie dollar and the sentiment in the market. As I mentioned, really no business, no support for the business whatsoever in this budget. Next. We are at the lowest productivity level in this country since the beginning of the decade. There's no incentives for investment. Normally, every budget, there's incentives for investment. None of that. As I said, it all hinges on commodity prices being where they are. If actually they go below $60, which potentially may, if China decides not to buy, then we really have big deficits and big problems. This budget, in my opinion, is a band-aid solution, is a sugar hit. We will see the immediate impact as if it's an improvement. It may well increase inflation. It seems to be short-term vision. And again, something that was completely ignored in this budget is that, if you recall, in the coalition days, 3 or 4 years ago, to basically to eliminate bracket creep. As you know, the first 18,000, then 32,000, then 45, each one has a percent. They eliminated some of these brackets so that people pay less tax effectively. And that was approved by the opposition, who was the leader at the time. That will happen in 2025, and that will cost the government $69 billion. That is not factored in any of the calculations of Jim Chalmers. So if you look at 2025, by opinion, you have to add another $70 billion in additional expense unless they renege on that promise that they agreed to 3 or 4 years ago. Next. No tax reform. The company tax rate, for those of you who were in business back in the 80s, was 49%. Company tax rate was 49% back in the 80s. Today it's 25%. And again, in the last 6-7 years, we've seen a big drop from 30% to 28.5%, to 27.5%, 26.5%, to 25%. Today, most of these people in the room pay 25% if your revenue is $50 million or less. And that's a big testament, really, to change the tax laws to basically help business, because still 25% is a big burden on business when you add to it superannuation and salary tax, withholding and GST and the rest of it. Next. Yeah, that's basically my presentation for today. I hope I didn't I probably did take over time. My apologies, really. Normally we do it on that screen, but that's been too much light. It's meant to be for videos, not for this type of presentation.
Excellent. So what we'll do, we'll conduct a couple of questions. So if you do have a question, please do raise your hand. I'll come throughout the room. We don't have a second mic, so we need you guys to project. But just before we do, just looking through the synopsis of that federal budget breakdown, should I say smackdown, raise your hand if you feel like you're a budget winner. If you're a budget winner, you benefit the most out of it. No, raise your hand if you feel that you're a budget loser. You didn't get the best out of it. Well, I'll tell you what, You're all winners in my eyes if it counts for anything. But if it doesn't, $650 to go on your way in the next energy bill, so hopefully that will go somewhere. Yeah, there's a bit of a round of applause on that one. But what we'll do now, please do raise your hands. We'll go around the room, one by one. We'll take your questions. And I'll start off over here. If I missed you, please do jump up and down. Hopefully we'll see you then.
Thank you for a great presentation, very informative. The money that Australia owes and the interest that it pays, who do we owe that to, and what is the interest rate for that? Thank you.
Most of that interest is actually in government bonds. So basically, you are paying, I think I showed you the interest rate as a proportion of GDP being big. I think, I'm not sure if it's November this year or November next year, the Australian government has to refinance $40 billion that they borrowed at 0.25%, and now they have to refinance at 5 and 6%. It's really no different than new mortgage mortgage. So the fact that rates globally are going up, I'm not sure about the exact source of funding, but they do borrow from third parties in addition to borrowing from the public, from other companies, from international markets, with government bonds, with coupon rates. But the rate would be, as I said, because of the lower interest rates. I know for a fact $40 billion have to be refinanced from 0.25% to 5.5 or 6%. So it is a big burden. I think the interest bill on the government is $30 to $40 billion every year. So it's again impacting us in terms of the spend that we have.
Excellent. There's no other questions. I'll probably throw it up. We'll get one at the back over here in just a moment. I'll share my thoughts in a moment.
Rodney, thanks very much. Well done. One thing that people lose fact here is that this is the government's budget. This is not the country's budget. There's a big difference between the federal government budget and the actual revenues and expenses of this country when it comes to it. So our exports are really strong. And the revenue streams to Australia. We are a AAA rated country. And there's very few countries in the world that are AAA rated. So don't be depressed with this particular budget. The reality is this country has got the potential to overcome the debt levels. Very few countries in the world have got that capacity. So I think this is where a lot of people confuse government debt to sovereign, which is sovereign debt, to private debt. Right? So this country is not over indebted. It is actually capable of generating good revenues. One of the things that's missing out of this budget, and you covered it quite well, is that there's no initiative to bring inflation down. So what they've actually said, RBA, Reserve Bank, you control inflation. So they're basically telling the Reserve Bank, if they have to increase interest rates, go ahead and do it. And that's the hurt factor for the mortgage loans. So I think these are sort of the points that you've got to really look through the budget to really understand the implications and the results that could be generated in the next 12 months. The mortgage bill is going to be hit harder over the next 12 months. And the RBA will most likely look at a few more increases before they take it off.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe, for making that comment. As you know, economically speaking, governments use fiscal policy and monetary policy. I think lately they really did not use fiscal policy to the extent that they should have used it in my opinion. They let basically the Reserve Bank run the monetary policy, and they reacted through this action or lack of action by just increasing spending a little bit and stopping infrastructure. I think if there was better coordination between the monetary and the fiscal policy, I think would be in a better shape. But I agree with you. I said it many times. We are the lucky country. We are a rich country. That's why I put the GDP per capita. We should not feel depressed, but I think we, like most other countries, actually, we're going through that, process of adjusting to this new world of high inflation. And I think that high inflation of 2-3%, we will get there, because you compare actually inflation to the year prior. It's been almost a year with high inflation. So the next year actually we're going to compare it to this year. So really we should be already normalizing by achieving that 2-3%, because we're not comparing it to the base year of the 2022 year. By the time we get to 24, 25, I think it will be a different scenario altogether. But I think the high prices are there to stay.
Excellent. We have a last question on the side here. If you do have an urgent question, please do let me know. But over to you, John.
Thank you, Rodney. I just wondered whether you can answer this, or I should direct it to a politician or a treasurer. But in America, when they need more money, they print. They're a bit insane. So they print. To what extent do we emulate them? Do you know? Or do we simply borrow the money? We certainly could possibly be borrowing it from other governments, because they all seem to be broke anyway.
I think we do both. Not America just print for the sake of printing. We print to normalize money supply with money demand. So if there's a shortage of money, we print money. But mostly we actually borrow money, as I said, internally or externally. But there is an element of printing money that would be only a must, like any other. As you grow and you need more money in the economy, you print some money. But it's calculated against the backdrop of the demand for the money. And again, that's part of the Treasury Department, not part of the, basically, Ministry of Finance. They manage the supply of money, they control the interest rates, and it's really part of the monetary policy that they do. It is quite a complicated process, I must admit, John. One last question?
First of all, I want to congratulate excellent presentation. Got a lot out of that. I think it deserves it. Just a question. We looked at the deficit and the surplus, and most of the time when Labor's in, we've got a deficit, and when Liberals in, occasionally we have a surplus. You talked about $250 billion that goes to Social Security or whatever. What figure is that if Liberal government was in? Is it similar, or is there much difference, or what does history show?
Of course it will be different. Look at the current budget. That $250 billion, add to it the numbers that I mentioned, the 14 billion and the 15 billion. It will be high. I mean, there is an appetite. I mean, Labour government is sort of the middle class party, political party. So to them, that is bread and butter. That is their mandate, basically. Liberal Party, as you know, is more pro-business, but equally, really, the last, in fact, it's not mentioned, but the job seeker increase, it increased by $50 in the terms of the Liberals, not Labour. Labour increased actually by $40 a fortnight. Liberal actually, so they're not unfair. They actually do look after the network. Probably Labour, as you can tell from this budget, look at it from a different perspective. Their priorities are the underprivileged, and that's their mandate, that's their political, basically, mandate how to run the place. So, probably would be less if it was a Liberal. It would be interesting to see what it was, at least in percentage terms, in the John Howard era. And I can guarantee you it will be slightly less than this.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. My question is a short one. I remember you displayed the page on inflation versus wages, and it seems to me, I've been watching some media. The Labor government seems to be very confident that we're going to be above, our wages are going to be above the inflation rate. But how do we measure this effectively? And why do they seem so confident that we're going to be, our wages are going to be above the inflation rate? It seems to be a common trend, the thing that I've been watching on the news. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for a good question. Ordinarily, wages growth should be ahead of inflation. That's the normal process. If you remember during the election campaign, you will not, if you go back a year ago and you see how many times Albanese went on television, on radio, saying, oh, we need to do something about the rate of growth of wages compared to inflation. 12 months later, we're still where we are. In fact, if we worse, because inflation became higher and wages growth still 3 or 3.5%. I think that's really structuring, not in the hands of Labour, not in the hands of Liberal. If you look at the inflation rate, pre-COVID, as I mentioned, it was really 1 to 2%. And employers, really, wages growth has been very muted. For the last 10 years, most pay rises, particularly in small business, have been in the 3 to 5% range. Slightly in line or lower than inflation. It will take a while, particularly with the high inflation now. Not every employer can afford actually an increase of 8% or 6% when you have, particularly even you work in Westpac, so it's a big company. Not every company can afford that pay rise of 10-15% to overcome the inflation problem. It will take time. I think I think they mentioned by 2025. If you saw the graph, the wages growth will actually exceed inflation, and I tend to agree with that number because it will take 2-3 years if we stabilize inflation at that 2-3%, 2.5% level. Yet we continue to give pay rises for the next 2-3 years. Yes, we will achieve that objective, and you can tell it wasn't too far off. Actually, it was slightly better than inflation. So time will fix that problem as much as time created that problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Please give a second round of applause as he leaves the stage. That's an excellent presentation. I've got to tell you, if you did not enjoy that presentation, you're in the wrong room. But if not again, you probably enjoyed the girl in front of you anyhow, so at least you'll win in that way. So thank you very much. We'll conclude formalities for this moment. We'll see you back again at roughly 9 o'clock for general business. And of course, for the lucky door prize, if you haven't put your card into that drawer, please do so now. And we have Mr. Ali running around with the bucket, so make sure you please do get involved. And there'll be a lovely prize from GE Enterprise. Thank you, everybody.